Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. What you're about to hear isn't a conspiracy theory, a tabloid rumor, or a scripted drama. This is a verbatim courtroom testimony, federal, sworn, and explosive. The trial of Sean Diddy. Combs wasn't supposed to be anything more than another celebrity headline. But when former FBI agent Mark Halperin took the stand in a crisp Navy suit, the air shifted. The badge under his lapel wasn't just federal identification. It was a signal that something deeper, something darker, was about to be exposed. His words didn't just implicate a man. They cracked open a system. Halperin's testimony revealed a web of protection and manipulation so vast it reached the highest office in the United States. And when he said the name, former President Donald Trump, the courtroom froze. Gasps echoed. Reporters looked at each other, stunned. For years, people had asked how Diddy stayed untouchable, how he could glide through scandals, accusations, whispers, and evidence emerging unscathed every single time. According to Halperin, it wasn't about powerful lawyers. It was about being valuable to the powerful. And then came the next witness. No name, no credentials. Just a nod from the judge, and a man in a dark suit with a briefcase took the stand. He was introduced only as Special Agent Redacted, a senior operative who spent decades in the FBI's Organized Crime and Political Corruption Division. And now, for the first time, he was ready to speak on the record. "I've been tracking Mr. Combs and his enterprise for over 20 years, he began. "This is not new. What's new is that we're finally allowed to talk about it." The room was dead silent as he opened a black folder. What followed wasn't just a narrative. It was a dismantling of the illusion that celebrity operates outside politics. The agent detailed suspicious financial transactions, parties that overlapped with known trafficking networks, shell companies in Luxembourg and beyond. Every time the Bureau moved closer, the doors slammed shut. In 2001, a sting tied directly to Diddy's financial team was blocked at the highest level. "This wasn't celebrity protection," the agent said. "This was federal interference." He laid out a timeline, 1999 to 2013. Every time Diddy was linked to crimes like trafficking or wire fraud, key witnesses vanished. Investigators were reassigned, evidence disappeared. And then came the bombshell. In 2003, the Bureau believed Diddy was operating under unofficial informant protection, an elite, undocumented status granted only by someone near the very top. There were only 3 people in government who could have authorized it. Diddy knew exactly who they were. The story was no longer about crimes committed. It was about who let them happen. The agent then revealed photos from as early as 2005, showing Diddy at private events with Donald Trump. These weren't political rallies or photo ops. These were closed-door meetings, off-the-books events with high-value assets, campaign operatives, and whispered deals. Diddy, it seemed, wasn't just a music mogul. He was an asset, trading information, influence, and protection. It started with silence, a tension so thick you could almost hear it pressing against the courtroom walls. Former FBI agent Mark Halperin had just laid the groundwork, but when Special Agent Redacted took the stand, everything changed. This wasn't a career agent delivering dry facts. This was a man who had spent decades inside the darkest corridors of federal power and now, finally, was ready to speak without filters. He sat at the witness stand, opened his briefcase, and pulled out a black folder, plain, unmarked, but heavy with implication. He didn't look at Diddy, who sat stiff at the defense table, nor did he acknowledge the jury. He simply spoke. "I've been tracking Mr. Combs and his enterprise for over 2 decades, he began, his voice calm but deliberate. "This is not new. What's new is that we're finally allowed to talk about it." And then, he did. He told the courtroom that the FBI first opened inquiries into Combs' operations in the late 1990s. The early signs were subtle, but persistent. Financial transactions that defied explanation. Private events overlapping with known trafficking routes. connections to shell corporations stretching across Europe, particularly in financial havens like Luxembourg. According to the agent, these weren't just red flags, they were neon signs. And yet, every time the Bureau prepared to take a step forward, something strange would happen. Warrants would be pulled, operations would be canceled, key agents would be reassigned or ordered to halt. The courtroom leaned in as he described a pivotal moment in 2001. The FBI had launched an international sting operation on suspected money laundering through a European affiliate of Bad Boy Entertainment. The case had legs. Solid evidence connecting Combs' financial team to forged invoices, offshore accounts, and fake businesses. But when the team went to secure warrants, they were denied. Flat out denied. And not by a judge or due to lack of evidence. No. The order came from above, from offices in Washington that weren't supposed to be involved. That's when I knew, the agent said. We weren't dealing with celebrity protection. We were dealing with federal interference. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Some jurors shifted in their seats. The agent continued, trying to clarify his position without sounding like a conspiracy theorist. This wasn't about scared, local police. This was about high-level people telling us to stand down. From the top, Washington. He paused, letting the weight of that hang in the air. Then he detailed the fallout. Files went missing. Witnesses were relocated under unexplained circumstances. Internal investigators, his own colleagues, were suddenly removed from cases without warning. At first, it seemed coincidental. But, after years of seeing the same pattern repeat, it became undeniable. The prosecution then introduced a timeline. It ran from 1999 to 2013 and showed every documented attempt to investigate or prosecute Combs for serious criminal activity, trafficking, assault, financial fraud, and next to each incident was a corresponding anomaly, a key witness who disappeared, a crucial piece of evidence that went missing, a federal delay that froze everything mid-process. It wasn't isolated, it was systematic. One juror visibly flinched. A woman in the back gasped and covered her mouth, and just when the tension seemed unbearable, the agent dropped the first real bombshell. In 2003, he said, we had reason to believe Mr. Combs was operating under a form of unofficial informant protection, the kind of arrangement that doesn't appear in any public log. That kind of status doesn't come from local offices. It comes from very high up, and at the time there were only 3 people in the federal government who could have authorized it. The courtroom froze. No one spoke. And Diddy, seated at the defense table, finally moved, his face slightly tightened, his eyes not blinking. He knew exactly who those people were, but the agent didn't name them. Not yet. Then the story shifted. The agent leaned forward, his voice taking on a more measured tone. This isn't just about the crimes committed, he said. It's about who allowed those crimes to continue. At this point, he reopened the black folder and presented a series of photographs to the jury. The first showed Combs at a 2005 fundraiser in Chicago, standing next to then-Senator Donald Trump. The photo was grainy, but the context was unmistakable. The next photo, taken in 2007, depicted a private, off-the-record event in Washington, D.C., hosted by a lobbying group closely tied to the Republican National Committee. Diddy wasn't on the official guest list, but there he was, listed under an alias, and he wasn't alone. These weren't photo ops, the agent explained. These were meetings, closed-door sessions. We believe Mr. Combs was involved in a kind of informal intelligence exchange, offering information on individuals of interest in return for legal protection. The courtroom erupted in confusion. The defense leapt to their feet, shouting, "Objection!" before the agent could finish his sentence. But the prosecution was prepared. They handed over supporting exhibits, travel records, metadata from internal communications, even a redacted memo referencing a cultural liaison session involving DT and other entertainment assets. It was clear who DT referred to. Then came the 2009 revelation. Just months after Donald Trump took office, the FBI had submitted a formal wiretap request. The target? Sean Combs. The purpose? To intercept communications between Combs and multiple individuals already under investigation for drug trafficking and money laundering through his media companies. The request had been submitted through all the proper channels. And then suddenly, inexplicably, it was denied. The courtroom stirred again. Denied by who? The prosecutor asked. The agent turned to the final page in his folder. It was a call log. The call came from a legal office, affiliated with the White House. The name was redacted, but the timestamp matched the exact moment the wiretap request was pulled. The judge instructed the jury to disregard any speculation. But the implication was already in the air, thick and undeniable. A man under federal surveillance had just shut down an investigation with a single call, and the source of that call was tied directly to the highest office in the land. "We're not saying President Trump personally protected Mr. Combs," the agent clarified. "But what we are saying is that his administration created a channel, a relationship that allowed Mr. Combs to operate untouched for years." The courtroom exploded with activity. Reporters scribbled frantically. Even the stenographer paused, visibly shaken. "This wasn't luck," the agent said. "This was calculated, engineered, enabled by forces far beyond what any of us imagined." And then, almost like a final blow to the room's collective breath, the agent held up one last photograph. This one wasn't grainy. It wasn't covert. It was high resolution, taken at a private function in Martha's Vineyard. In it stood three men: Sean Diddy Combs, former President Donald Trump, and Reverend Al Sharpton. This wasn't a public event. It was a candlelit gathering at an estate owned by a billionaire with ties to both defense contracting and the entertainment industry. The photo was taken in 2014. The agent calmly explained, "They called it a charity dinner. We obtained the guest list through court-approved channels. Many attendees are now linked to sealed investigations. Some were CIA assets. Others were on federal watch lists. Mr. Combs wasn't there as a guest. He was there as a messenger, delivering intel from the streets to the gates of power. And in return, his sins were forgiven." A juror dropped their pen. The judge slammed the gavel. But the damage had been done. The illusion had cracked. By the time Special Agent Redacted resumed his testimony, the energy in the room had changed. The faces in the jury box weren't just curious anymore. They were tight with disbelief, anxiety, even fear. And it wasn't because of what had already been said. It was because everyone sensed that what was coming next was worse. Much worse. This was no longer about a mogul who had friends in high places. It was about a system. A machine built for control, intimidation, and silence. The agent began to outline how Combs wasn't just protected, he was enabled. His empire thrived not in spite of the chaos around it, but because of how that chaos was used as leverage. According to the agent, a crucial turning point in the investigation came when they uncovered references to a cache of surveillance footage. Not rumors, not speculation. Real tapes, hours of them, captured from properties owned or controlled by Sean Combs. The dates went back as far as 2003. The agent stated clearly, "We know these tapes existed because some of them passed through federal hands, briefly and under circumstances that still raise red flags." He clicked a remote, and a single image lit up the courtroom screen. A screenshot from a time-stamped video feed inside one of Combs' Los Angeles homes. It was a control room, nearly 30 monitors, each linked to different locations across his properties: bedrooms, hallways, pools, studios. Many of the cameras were hidden. Most of the people on them, the agent said, had no idea they were being filmed. There was a stir in the gallery. People weren't just shocked, they were horrified. The idea that one of the most powerful figures in entertainment had been secretly recording guests, celebrities, and political players in states of vulnerability wasn't just invasive. It was dangerous. Then came the kicker. In 2016, the FBI had secured a warrant to seize 3 hard drives believed to contain a portion of this footage. But less than 20 minutes after the field office received clearance, a fire broke out in the server room of the designated property. The damage was total. The cause was arson. The timing, the agent noted, suggests someone on the inside leaked our operation. Someone warned them. Only 1 drive survived. It had been stored in a safe deposit box in Puerto Rico and was recovered through unrelated means. But what was on that drive confirmed everything the Bureau feared. Footage of celebrities, corporate, executives, and government officials, some intoxicated, others clearly coerced. Did any of these videos include Donald Trump? The prosecutor asked. The agent responded, no, but several of his close allies, donors, and political partners were present, and Mr. Combs was heard referencing them by first name. He knew their secrets. He paused before delivering the line that would haunt the courtroom. He didn't just keep those tapes for his ego. He kept them as currency, insurance, a fail-safe in case anyone ever tried to cut him off. It wasn't blackmail in the traditional sense. It was something more subtle, more insidious. If you resisted him, if you questioned him, he didn't need to threaten you. He only needed to remind you that he remembered everything. And that was enough. This leads us to what the FBI eventually named Project Ghost Room. The agent described a moment in 2022 during a raid on a Newark, New Jersey storage facility. Hidden beneath a fake company front, they found a climate-controlled vault. Inside were dozens of hard drives, hundreds of Polaroids, and most damning of all, a folder labeled BL Priority, Protected Archive. The contents? Handwritten notes, flight manifests, edited surveillance photos, transcribed conversations from hidden mics, many believed to be planted in nightclubs frequented by Combs between 2004 and 2019. It was an archive of leverage. Nothing more, nothing less. The photos were devastating. Black and white snapshots of public figures in vulnerable positions, accompanied by timestamps, initials, and coded keywords. Leverage, hush, verify use. This wasn't just a collection. It was a tool, a strategy, a blueprint for maintaining control in a world that usually chews people up and spits them out. Agent Redacted told the jury that every time a new artist refused to sign with Combs or pushed back on a deal, rumors would mysteriously appear in tabloids, drug stories, breakdown stories, sex tapes. Sometimes the rumors were enough. Other times, the individual would be forced to sign. We believe, the agent said, he had an entire machinery in place, PR teams, investigators, editors, all operating quietly, keeping him powerful, keeping others quiet. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as the agent shared one particularly cruel case. A young pop star had refused to perform at a Combs-hosted event in 2017. Within days, whispers of a mental health breakdown began circulating online. Weeks later, she signed with a label tied to Combs' distribution pipeline. No one forced her, no threats, just the unspoken understanding. The tapes existed. They always did. Then the agent held up a single document from the archive. One line, handwritten, stopped the room cold. DT plus RS, all handled. Payoff confirmed. Donation received. According to the FBI, DT referred to Donald Trump, and RS was believed to be a high-level recording studio executive. While no video evidence of Trump existed in the tapes, the implication was clear. Donations, favors, and silence, all exchanged within a pipeline of power that stretched from recording booths to the White House. This isn't conjecture, the agent clarified. These are not just random coincidences. These are patterns. These are tactics. This wasn't about throwing wild parties. This was about building a shadow empire. What the courtroom learned that day wasn't just about one man's crimes. It was about how systems can be built not only to protect predators, but to reward them. Diddy didn't survive scandal after scandal because he was lucky. He survived because he engineered a fortress of blackmail, legal interference, and elite complicity that made him, for decades, nearly untouchable. And if that fortress is finally cracking, it's not because it wasn't strong enough. It's because someone, somewhere, finally decided it was time to talk. As the testimony deepened, the courtroom shifted from shock to sorrow. What started as a narrative of power and political collusion was now drilling into something far more intimate. The lives destroyed, the dreams crushed, and the people silenced by Sean Combs' alleged shadow empire. This wasn't just about systems anymore. This was about victims. Special Agent Redacted returned to the stand with a new piece of evidence. A manila folder marked "Confidential Witness Files. Declined." These weren't the faces the media followed or names trending on social platforms. These were the individuals who came forward behind closed doors, victims, survivors, witnesses who, despite the pain, couldn't face the retaliation they feared, would follow if they testified in public. "There are at least 26 individuals," the agent said, "who gave us direct statements regarding their experiences with Mr. Combs, but they declined to appear in open court due to fear. Fear of retaliation. Fear of blackmail. Fear of what would happen to their families." He began reading excerpts, each one more disturbing than the last. The first came from a former choreographer who had worked within Combs' inner circle between 2005 and 2012. She described being invited to an after-party following a concert appearance, something routine. But what she remembered next was fragmented. She woke up in a hotel room, disoriented, bruised, and alone. She never filed a police report. When she tried to speak to her agency about what happened, she was let go within the week. The implication wasn't subtle. She was expendable. Her silence was expected. Another story came from a male model, only 19 at the time, who was flown to Miami under the impression he'd be shooting for a fashion campaign. According to his affidavit, what he walked into was something out of a psychological thriller: private security, no phones, dim lighting, and a handler who told him not to speak unless spoken to. He said the party was like Eyes Wide Shut, but with cameras you couldn't see. He left the next morning, shaken. When he tried to talk to others in the industry, doors started closing, agencies pulled back, calls weren't returned. And then, Agent Redacted read from a statement labeled "Only CW11, Confidential Witness 11. The room went still. CW11's statement described meeting Diddy when they were just 17. They believed it was the start of a mentorship opportunity through someone connected to Diddy's team. "I thought I was lucky," the statement read, "but it was never about mentorship. He told me if I ever left, if I ever said anything, my family would regret it." The judge looked down. Members of the jury covered their mouths. There was no dramatic music, no cut to commercial, just the weight of truth. And it hurt. These weren't stories pulled from tabloids. These were accounts that investigators cross-referenced against timelines, travel logs, and property access data. According to the agent, many of the names, dates, and locations matched known Diddy-hosted events: exclusive parties, closed recording sessions, international trips masked as business ventures. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a long-term pattern. Agent Redacted lifted a list with redacted names, but the columns included dates, event titles, and location pins. When asked by the judge what the document represented, he answered without hesitation. "Confirmed victims," he said. "Individuals whose accounts independently align with multiple data points from our investigation." That's when the courtroom heard perhaps the most disturbing detail of all. In 2012, the Miami field office carried out a trafficking sting. A known associate of Combs was arrested in possession of narcotics, underage girls, and evidence of offshore wire transfers. It was the kind of case that would typically explode across the media, but within 48 hours, the case was gone. The file was sealed. The agents were reassigned. The suspect? Released. How? The prosecutor asked. Agent Redacted didn't blink. A phone call came in from a Capitol Hill extension, he said. That's all we know. No name. Just one phone call. And everything disappeared. He shared emails from within the Bureau, notes from confused agents, investigators who couldn't believe the case had evaporated. One email in particular chilled the room. It read, "Don't ask why this got buried. Just be glad you're not in the room." These weren't bureaucratic mistakes. They were calculated acts to protect someone with influence so dense it bent legal processes around him. And while the systems bent, people broke. Careers were destroyed. Lives were altered. People who once believed they were protected by their contracts, reputations, or talent learned quickly that none of that mattered when you crossed the wrong man. Agent Redacted also shared examples of rising stars whose careers took a sharp turn after refusing Diddy's offers. In one case, a Grammy-nominated vocalist declined an invitation to a private recording retreat at a Caribbean estate. Weeks later, she faced a blitz of tabloid rumors, rehab, betrayal, secret relationships. Her label dropped her soon after. Years later, she resurfaced under a new name, with an indie team and no ties to any major distributor linked to Combs. The fear was never abstract. It was professional exile, financial ruin, character assassination. Diddy didn't need to say the words. People knew what would happen. One of the most haunting parts of the testimony came near the end of the day. The agent described an incident from 2015. Combs had traveled extensively that year, Haiti, Colombia, and several islands in the Caribbean. At first, it appeared to be luxury travel, but intel from foreign partners said otherwise. He wasn't just vacationing. He was meeting with individuals affiliated with South American cartels. Some gatherings took place on yachts. Some involved girls flown in from Brazil and Eastern Europe. At least one foreign source said these girls were told they were auditioning for American Idol. This wasn't about glamour. This wasn't about parties. This was about power and how that power used people. Behind every closed case, every blocked warrant, every vanished witness, there was a person who would never fully recover. Someone who would never again feel safe in a studio, on a stage, or even in their own home. That was the real cost of this empire. By the time Agent Redacted closed the folder and stepped down, the courtroom was in shambles emotionally. Jurors had tears in their eyes. The gallery was silent, not out of respect, but out of horror. Because now it wasn't just about what Diddy did. It was about what the system allowed and who it chose to protect. The final phase of Agent Redacted's testimony wasn't about systems or timelines anymore. It was about choice. Specifically, the decision to speak, to come forward in a world designed to punish truth-tellers and reward silence. What he revealed in the courtroom wasn't just a damning expose of a celebrity empire built on fear and blackmail. It was a call to understand why it had taken so long for anyone to say these things out loud. When the agent took the stand for what would be the last time, federal marshals lined the courtroom walls. It wasn't because of an immediate threat. It was because everyone in that building knew what was coming. "We've saved the final piece of evidence for today," the agent announced, unfolding a sealed transcript, his voice like sandpaper, dragging across glass. "This is a phone call intercepted in 2015 between Mr. Combs and a known figure associated with a lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. What followed stunned the courtroom. The call had been verified using voice recognition software and confirmed by multiple analysts. And when the agent began reading the transcript aloud, you could hear a pin drop. "You said, 'Keep it off the radar,'" Combs's voice allegedly said. "But I did my part. I brought in the dollars. I brought in the artists. We flipped 5 precincts. Blue last cycle. If I go down, some of y'all are coming with me. The statement wasn't coded. It was raw, direct, explosive. It wasn't about a business deal or a private matter. It was about campaign contributions, political influence, and voter mobilization, done not through grassroots efforts, but through celebrity leverage. The courtroom erupted. The idea that a sitting president's re-election strategy may have been entangled with a man now on trial for trafficking and blackmail wasn't just scandalous. It was historically chilling. One juror whispered, almost involuntarily, "Jesus Christ." The judge attempted to restore order, but the tone of the room had changed forever. Because that one sentence did something the hours of footage, witness, statements, and surveillance images could not. It revealed motive. Diddy hadn't just been buying silence. He was buying relevance. He was buying protection with a currency more potent than money: power over public opinion, power over elections, power over perception. And yet, despite all the fear, despite the years of silence, people did speak out. Agent Redacted held up a new folder marked Declined, Revisited. These were people who, after seeing the early testimonies, came back. People who originally chose not to testify, but had since changed their minds. Something had shifted. The floodgates weren't open, but they were cracking. He shared a statement from a former assistant who had once signed a lifetime NDA in exchange for a cash settlement. She described nights in private studios where she witnessed things that haunted her to this day: drugged guests, hidden cameras, a rotating cast of influencers, executives, and underage girls. "I stayed quiet," she wrote, "because I thought I had no choice. Now I know staying quiet made me part of it." Another former affiliate described how he had helped move hard drives from one safe house to another, never knowing what they contained. When the news broke about Project Ghost Room, he went into hiding. He was terrified, not just of Combs, but of the people backing him. "This wasn't just about music," he said. "It was intelligence work. It was a blackmail operation. And we were all pawns. Their decisions to come forward weren't made in a vacuum. They were made after seeing the bravery of others, after realizing that staying silent wasn't safety, it was complicity. And more than anything, their testimonies sparked something rare: public introspection." Across the country, newsrooms buzzed. On social media, hashtags exploded. But it wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about the system that had protected him. A system where NDAs were used like weapons, where legal settlements acted as silencers, where celebrity culture masked deep rot. In Washington, aides were scrambling. One source close to the trial leaked that crisis teams had formed both in D.C. and L.A. to assess what was next. Not legally, but politically. Who had received money? Who had made calls? Who had shown up on flight manifests or guest lists to those private parties that were now under federal scrutiny? And yet, amid the panic, there was hope, because now the public was watching. And unlike the scandals of the past, this one wasn't just about sex or drugs. It was about control. It was about how easily justice can be twisted, bought, or buried, when power shields the guilty. And that awareness created space for other victims to come forward, for journalists to dig deeper, for lawmakers to start asking questions. The court had learned by then that this wasn't an isolated operation. Diddy may have been the face, but the infrastructure that enabled him was vast. Entertainment firms, security companies, political consultants, even elements of law enforcement had played a role, some through corruption, others through fear. But all were part of the same shadow system. And now, for the first time, that system was being named. Agent Redacted closed his folder with a slow, deliberate motion. "I'm not here to make accusations," he said in his final words. "I'm here to expose patterns that were invisible until now. But now we see them. Now we know." As he stepped down from the witness stand, something shifted in the air. The trial was no longer about a celebrity scandal. It was a reckoning, a confrontation with the parts of power no one likes to talk about. the kind that can crush truth beneath influence and turn victims into ghosts. But now, those ghosts were speaking, and America was listening. For the first time, the illusion had cracked, and through that crack, maybe, just maybe, justice could find its way in. By the time court recessed on the final day of Agent Redacted's testimony, no one walked out the same. What had started as a celebrity trial, another tabloid headline meant to titillate the public, had transformed into something far more dangerous and far more necessary. This was no longer about one man. This was about the illusion of justice, the cost of silence and the depth of corruption that had long gone unnoticed, protected by wealth, influence, and fear. Sean Diddy Combs had been untouchable for decades, not because the accusations lacked merit, but because the system wasn't built to confront someone like him. From sealed investigations to disappearing witnesses, from suppressed warrants to arson at evidence sites, the courtroom heard a staggering pattern. Every attempt to hold him accountable was met with top-down resistance. And when that resistance came from places linked to political power, including offices associated with former President Donald Trump, the picture was no longer just scandalous. It was systemic. What gave the case its gravitas wasn't just the evidence. It was the emotion, the handwritten testimonies, the nameless voices in the confidential witness folders. The victims who had been blackmailed, silenced, and discarded by an entertainment empire that didn't care about their pain, only their obedience. These weren't stories designed to entertain. They were cries for help, hidden for years behind NDAs, legal threats, and whispered warnings. And yet, as heavy as the revelations were, there was something else growing in that courtroom. A sense that the wall of silence was finally cracking. One by one, people had come forward, some from fear, some from guilt, most because they'd seen the damage of staying quiet for too long. And while Agent Redacted never gave the crowd a neat resolution, no final villain, no single point of blame, he gave them something more valuable: clarity. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. This was a method, a playbook, a coordinated use of influence, blackmail, and privilege to maintain control. Diddy had built an empire on it. And that empire had wrapped its tendrils around the highest halls of American culture and power, from music studios to campaign war rooms. He wasn't the only one to benefit from the structure, but he was the one bold enough to turn it into a business model. And now, that model was on trial. The testimonies didn't just expose what was done in the dark. They forced a mirror onto institutions that let it happen: the media, the music industry, law enforcement, even parts of government. And while no one expects those systems to heal overnight, the exposure was a start. So what comes next? Maybe more names, maybe more trials, maybe a broader reckoning with how fame, influence, and power have been used, not to inspire but to destroy. Or maybe nothing. Maybe the system snaps back into silence once the cameras are off. But for a few weeks in one federal courtroom, the truth was louder than the machine. And that alone changed everything. You've just heard testimony that rewrites everything we thought we knew about celebrity, politics, and justice. Behind the flashing lights and designer suits was something far more sinister: a man who allegedly weaponized fame to silence victims, control politicians, and manipulate the system from the inside. If this made you angry, if it opened your eyes, or even just made you think, don't let it stop here. Hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because stories like this aren't just about one man. They're about all of us, and the world we choose to accept. Let's choose better. Let's speak louder. Let's not forget